It is time for another edition of Bands That Changed My Life, and I'm very excited to talk today about industrial band Skinny Puppy. Now, I heard of these guys in my explorations of Nine Inch Nails. It's a band I was very much into at the time. Got very interested in kind of reading interviews with Trent Reznor, and at some point he mentioned Skinny Puppy as an influence, and so I was like, well, if they're good enough for Trent, they're good enough for me, and I want to hear more of this crazy music that I'm getting into. So I kind of just searched around the file sharing sites, as was the thing to do at that time, and I happened upon the album Too Dark Park and pressed play, and it all started with Convulsion.
He's seeing monsters. He's losing his mind, and he feels it going.
Now, this track was unlike anything I had heard before, and I know I say that all the time on these episodes, but particularly in this case, until this moment, the so-called industrial I knew was mired in sort of radio alternative influences like Marilyn Manson and Rammstein, and don't get me wrong, I love those bands and I like that style of music, but this was something different altogether. It had this perfect, like these horror movie sound bites that encapsulated everything that was going on, and then you had Kevin's haunting keys and Ogre's one-of-a-kind, unhinged stream of consciousness vocal delivery. This truly was a nightmare come to life. And to be honest, I wasn't even sure if I liked it at first. I was just like, what is this? Like, what in the world? But morbid curiosity just kept me coming back. And Too Dark Park quickly became my favorite album, but I knew that I needed more.
All good people are asleep and dreaming.
So I started poking around at used CD stores at the mall, and I turned up Rabies. There were quite a few copies there. It's an interesting album in that people both seem to love it and hate it in equal parts. It's an album heavily featuring Al Jorgensen of Ministry fame on guitar, which allowed me to sort of branch off even further into other classic industrial bands, and also introduced me to one of my all-time favorite songs, just period, Warlock, with synths that are just equal parts beautiful and quite ominous. This ode to the real-life horrors of Charles Manson, along with its highly censored music video, struck a further chord with my fascination of all things shocking and macabre. And so further down the rabbit hole I went, and since some of Puppy's content was harder to come by, this band was one that really started the ball rolling with my CD collecting. I started ordering older albums online and paid premium price for the likes of Bites, Remission, Mind the Perpetual Intercourse, and Cleanse, Fold, and Manipulate. And it really was fascinating and informative to see the progression to what I found on Too Dark Park from the more kind of 80s influence sentiment of tracks like Assimilate. Over time, VIVIsectVI also became another fast favorite with such family-friendly fare as VX Gas Attack, Human Disease Scum, and Hospital Waste. I became enamored with the dark atmosphere and delved further into the lore of the band, learning all about their environmental and animal rights activism, as well as how these themes played into their sometimes controversial stage performances, even at some point leading to an arrest, I believe, for a satirical onstage vivisection of a fake dog that some people thought was real. onwards and upwards through their very meaty discography. I puzzled at the more experimental approach of Last Rites, something I'm still trying to wrap my brain around in many cases, leading right into the much more straightforward initial swan song of the band, and albeit unfinished album, The Process. And at this point, I learned about the unfortunate story of the heroin overdose and demise of Dwayne Godel along the way. It seemed to be the end for the band, with me only just discovering their last album a good 8 years after the fact. But lucky for me, just a year later, the band reunited. And so whereas some people had like this giant gap between like the last time they had heard Puppy and this new material, it was a relatively short time for me. And so they released The Greater Wrong of the Right. And I'll admit that the new approach on this album, especially Ogre's kind of less vicious delivery, took some time to adjust to. But all the same, I was happy to just hear the next chapter of the band and that they were continuing on. And songs like New World kind of fused what I had learned about in discovering also Ogre's self-titled side project into the Skinny Puppy sound. And the result was still unlike anything else I was listening to at the time. And they continued on with Mythmaker, Handover, and Weapon, often with mixed results, but always a continued sense of innovation and genuine creativity. There is some really excellent, some of their best like melodic, haunting work on Mythmaker. And then with Weapon, it actually felt like they kind of came back around full circle to the more aggressive retro sound of their early days. And they even featured a reworked version of the track Solvent. Like most of the bands in this series, I could really go on forever. I've only just scratched the surface, but there's just so much to dig into, from the mountains of incredible tracks to deciphering the cryptic lyrics and exploring the band's history. There could be a whole channel dedicated to that, which I would kind of love to do. So in the comments, if you want to hear more about my thoughts on Skinny Puppy, by all means, tell me that. But honestly, I'll leave the rest up to you for now. The purpose of this series is really just to pass along that same spark that led me to my own personal journey with the band. And in that, hopefully, I have done my job. So, thanks as always for listening. Again, please do subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Share it with others. Follow us on social media or via the mailing list. And again, if you keep coming back and you really enjoy what I'm doing here and you want to support, just $1 a month makes a huge difference in covering the overhead. So check down in the description, links to all that stuff, including the Patreon and Subscribe Star, where you can do that. And of course, stick around, watch these other videos. There's quite a few on the channel now. Like there's a lot of content. I can't seem to stop, but I'm going to for now. This is Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.